October 4th, 1957. Radios across America started picking up a strange sound. Beep, beep, beep. It wasn't music. It wasn't a news broadcast. It was coming from space. More precisely, from a metal ball about the size of a beach ball, orbiting the Earth once every 96 minutes. A metal ball built by the Soviet Union. Its name was Sputnik. And when Americans heard that beep, it wasn't the sound of a satellite passing overhead. It was the sound of losing. Wait, why was everyone terrified of a ball that only knew one word? Sputnik was small, 58 centimeters across, 83.6 kilograms. Polished aluminum, 4 antennas, 2 radio transmitters inside. Most of the weight was batteries. It didn't take photos, it didn't carry weapons, it just beeped. For 22 days, until the batteries died. And here's the part that should have been embarrassing for the Soviets. This wasn't even the satellite they wanted to launch. The real one, a proper flying laboratory, was months behind schedule. So they threw together a backup. Its internal designation was PS-1, Prostейший Sputnik, which translates to simplest satellite. Not advanced, not victory, simplest. The thing that terrified the United States was officially named the Easy One, because the satellite was never the point. The point was what it took to get it up there. To lift 83 kilograms into orbit, you need a rocket that can throw something heavy across the planet. The Soviets had one. It was called the R-7. And the R-7 was not designed for beach balls. It was designed to carry a nuclear warhead, including to New York, including to Washington. That was the sound Americans were actually hearing, not a satellite. Proof. 1957 was a difficult year to explain to yourself. To understand why this hit so hard, you have to understand what America believed about itself. America believed it was the most technologically advanced country on Earth. It had won the war. It had built the bomb first. The Soviet Union, in this view, was a backward country, held back by communism. Then Americans opened their newspapers and read that the backward country had just done something America hadn't. That night, Senate Majority Leader Lyndon Johnson was hosting a barbecue at his Texas ranch. He heard the news on the radio and walked his guests outside to look at the sky. He later wrote about that moment.
Now, somehow, in some new way, the sky seemed almost alien.
The White House took a different approach. 5 days after the launch, President Eisenhower held a press conference. He wanted everyone to calm down.
They have put one small ball in the air. I wouldn't believe that at this moment you have to fear this.
He was, technically, correct. Nobody cared. Historians would later call this whole period the Sputnik crisis. That is not an exaggeration. The country that assumed it would be first was standing in its own backyard, looking up at something it hadn't built. And then America tried to launch its own, on live television. 2 months later, America was ready to respond. The rocket was Vanguard. The satellite was the size of a grapefruit. December 6th, 1957, Cape Canaveral, Florida. In front of the press, in front of the cameras, the whole country watched. The rocket rose about 1.2 meters. That's 4 feet. That is not a metaphor. 2 seconds after ignition, it lost thrust. It settled back onto the pad and exploded. And then the grapefruit popped off the top. It landed in the scrubland next to the pad, still beeping. Its transmitters had switched on exactly as designed, so the satellite sat in the dirt, broadcasting to America that America had failed again. The papers had a field day. Flopnik, Kaputnik, Puthnik, Dudnik, Stay Putnik. Most of those came from British newspapers, which somehow makes it worse. And then the Soviets joined in. A Soviet delegate at the United Nations made a helpful suggestion.
Would the United States like to apply for our aid program? The one for underdeveloped countries.
The man with a working rocket had been told to sit down. Here's the worst part. America didn't have to lose this. Rewind 2 months to the night Sputnik launched. In Huntsville, Alabama, the Army's rocket team was hosting a cocktail party. Their guest was Neil McElroy, who was days away from becoming Secretary of Defense. Mid-party, the news arrived. and Wernher von Braun, who had been begging for permission to launch a satellite for years, cornered the incoming Secretary of Defense at a party.
Vanguard will never make it. We have the hardware on the shelf. We can put up a satellite in 60 days, Mr. McElroy.
His commanding officer, General Medeiros, stepped in to manage expectations.
Make it 90 days, Werner.
So why had they been benched? Because von Braun had built rockets for the Nazis before switching sides. The Eisenhower administration wanted America's first satellite to be a clean, civilian, scientific achievement. It wanted a good story. It got a televised bonfire instead. When they finally let the Army try, it took under 3 months. Explorer 1 reached orbit on January 31st, 1958. And unlike Sputnik, it actually did science on the way up. Its instrument opened the way to discovering the radiation belts wrapped around the Earth. Turns out the guy they'd been hiding in Alabama knew what he was doing. Congress investigates and discovers America is racing itself. Congress wanted to know why America had lost. The answer was uncomfortable. The Army had its own rocket team. The Navy had its own rocket team. The Air Force had its own rocket team, all competing for the same budget against each other. America wasn't losing a race to the Soviet Union. America was losing a race to itself in 3 separate lanes. On July 29, 1958, Eisenhower signed the National Aeronautics and Space Act. NASA opened for business that October. Its job was to consolidate, coordinate, and catch up. NASA was not born from wonder, not from scientific curiosity. NASA was born from fear. And then America decided the deeper problem was that it wasn't smart enough. So in September 1958, it passed the National Defense Education Act. Federal money poured into science and math classrooms nationwide. An entire generation of American kids got harder homework because a metal ball went beep. So next time you're stuck on a math problem, you know exactly who to blame. The Soviets kept winning anyway. Even after NASA existed, the record book stayed Soviet. First animal in orbit, Laika, 1957. First object to reach the moon, Luna 2, 1959. First photos of the far side of the moon, Luna 3, 1959. And then, on April 12, 1961, a human being. Yuri Gagarin, a Soviet Air Force pilot, went up on a fully automated spacecraft. The controls were locked because doctors weren't sure what space would do to a human mind. The override code was sealed in an envelope inside the capsule. He never opened it. As the rocket lifted, he said one word.
Poyechali! Let's go!
One orbit, 108 minutes. Home safe. Although home safe needs an asterisk. Gagarin didn't land inside his spacecraft. He ejected at 7 kilometers and parachuted down separately. The Soviets hid this for years, because the international record rules required the pilot to land with the craft. The greatest achievement in human history, and they were worried about the paperwork. America's answer came 23 days later. Alan Shepard went up for 15 minutes, on a suborbital flight that never reached orbit, which is genuinely brave and genuinely impressive. It is also not the same thing as circling the planet. Everyone knew it. So a young president decided to change the question. The president now was John F. Kennedy. Young, charismatic, and politically fragile. He had barely won the 1960 election. 5 days after Gagarin's flight, he had presided over the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion. He needed a win badly, and he saw the problem clearly. If America kept chasing the Soviets step by step, America would keep losing, because the Soviets were simply ahead. So Kennedy did something audacious. He didn't try to run faster. He moved the finish line. On May 25th, 1961, he stood before Congress.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Not, let's build better rockets. Not, let's catch up. The moon. At the time, America had flown one man for 15 minutes without reaching orbit. Here's the strange thing about the moon race. It didn't start because humans were curious about the moon. It started because a metal ball beeped over America. And America decided it could not live with that sound. If you think that's a cynical reading, listen to Kennedy himself. In November 1962, in a private White House meeting, he pushed back at the head of NASA. The tape exists.
Otherwise, we shouldn't be spending this kind of money. Because I'm not that interested in space.
The most inspiring sentence of the 20th century was, privately, a strategy. We went to the moon because we were afraid not to. That is not a comfortable fact. But without it, there is no NASA, no Apollo, no Armstrong, no footprint. Just a beach ball-sized Soviet satellite beeping quietly overhead. Everything that came next started with that sound. But there was one small problem with the president's promise. In 1961, America had no moon rocket, no lunar lander, no idea how to connect two spacecraft in orbit. It had none of the things it would need. What it had was a deadline. Oh, we are so not ready.